Hello, everybody. We're just getting some folks, letting folks in from the waiting room. If you joined, I see a number of folks joined as Natasha Duarte. If you want to go ahead and change your name, feel free.
Where do we change our name?
If you go to the participant list, if you can see your picture and you are oh, I guess you can't see who you are necessarily. So you should be able to hover over the three, if you turn your camera on, you can see, and you hover over your image. At the top, there's a little 3 dots, horizontal dots. And if you click on that, that is a place where one of the options will be rename yourself. Or I think it just says rename. And Kristen and I have put our cartoon characters in and some of our favorite foods. If you want to add that, you certainly can as well. We're just sort of having fun with this, as a lot of people are needing to change their names.
Good. Is that good?
Did someone have a question about that?
Natasha?
Yeah. Hi, Mario.
Hey, I'm here with my better half.
Excellent.
And the main reason, if I'm being honest, I couldn't have figured out how you just explained to do that.
So right. So if you can find, I'll just say it again for those of you who are joining as Natasha Duarte, if you do want to change your name, and you certainly don't have to, if you can see if you have your camera on and you can see who you are and you hover over your picture, there would be 3 little dots in a line. And if you click on that, one of the options is rename. Another way of doing that is in the participant list. If you find yourself and you hover over that, you'll get a little box that says more, and you can click on that. And that's another place where you can have an option of changing your name. And if you would like to remain anonymous as one of the many Natasha Duartes, that is totally fine with me. We've had a number of folks doing that. And just so you know, part of why we have this little funny renaming issue is that Zoom sends out, or when you do registration through Zoom, it creates a unique link for each participant. But there's no way to set up in Zoom meetings an automatic reminder from Zoom with that link. And so I had no way really of sending you out each a reminder from Zoom with that specific link. And so we're just doing this Natasha Duarte dance. And as long as people can join, that's what we're hoping for. We are right at a few minutes past the hour, and Mario, I know you were going to say a couple words to get us going, and so I don't know how long you have, so I'd like to just turn it over to you to get us going.
Sure. So, this is the last session with both of you guys, and I with Kristen and with Natasha, and I wanted to just spend a minute first thanking both of you for doing this. You didn't have to. And for those of you who don't know the story, I'm not going to go into, bore you with a lot of the detail, but I just kind of blindly reached out to Kristen, and, knowing the link between mental illness and addiction. And in the case of FAN, so all of you know, FAN tracks the 2 leading mental illnesses the leading mental illnesses that the people we help are dealing with. They are depression and anxiety. No, I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. And when I heard that data point, I thought, we got to do something about that. And enter my wife, who was had heard about Kristen through somewhere. I don't know where, but in any event.
I think a podcast, right?
Was it?
Yes, it was a podcast that my friend had sent over to me.
And she came into this office that we're in now and said, hey, you ought to talk to that woman. And I didn't think we had a chance. And the reason is most people don't care. They just don't. But both of you do care.
Yeah.
And for that, I thank you. And the proof is in the pudding. You're here on a Monday evening talking with everyone who is supporting us here. And so just thank you to both of you. Those of you who are participating on this Zoom meeting to learn more about the last 3 chapters of this book, thank you for doing this. It was an honor providing these books and workbooks to all of you. And if you think this is a good idea, I'm not opposed to doing more of this kind of thing in the future. Just go to our website, give us some feedback. We have questionnaires in our monthly meetings. So, give us the feedback and we'll do it. And this will not be the last thing we do with Kristen and with Natasha. I will find a reason to do something with them again. We'll make it happen. So just a quick plug for WFAN, then I'm going to go grab some dinner. But you guys, our next meeting in November, it's the second Monday in November. We listen to your feedback in these surveys. And one of the points that you brought up to us in virtually every survey was, why don't we share our stories anymore? And, we used to do that, right? We used to do that at the 242 church, much like they would do at an AA meeting or an Al-Anon. We literally give the microphone from one person to the next. And it's not that, you get to spend 5 minutes pouring your guts out, but you do get to say, my name is Natasha. I'm here because I care about people battling this disease. And I love everything that WFAN is doing. And I'm here to support FAN and all that they're doing. Next. So we got away from that. And one of the main reasons was COVID. It's not so easy passing the microphone around via Zoom. But quite honestly, I got sick of hearing everybody talking about it in the surveys in a positive way, in a positive way. So at our next meeting, we have a psychologist, Dr. Chantel Thomas, who is going to start the meeting, the first 10 minutes, talking about why sharing our stories is so important, both from a clinical perspective and from a community perspective. And then we are literally going to open it up.
Rumors. RUMOR.
We're literally going to open it up to everyone to, metaphorically speaking, pass the mic. So tune in for that if that is something of interest to you. And with that, again, you guys are the best, Kristen and Natasha. Never had to follow up with you guys. One of the things that concern me is when I partner with someone who I've never partnered with before, it's like, how much babysitting do I have to do? I'm happy to let everyone know that you were babysitting me. Okay? And so it's all good. You guys are the best. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks so much, Mario, and for the book donations as well.
Yeah. Yeah, Mario, thank you so much. I know that he's disappeared, but it has been a real pleasure working with WFAN, and it's an amazing organization doing really important work, and it's just been fun to have partners who are like, yes, food and mood count and community counts, and we have to help families and people in recovery because it's really important. So anyway, thank you to everybody at WFAN, the staff, and Mario and Jackie. Thanks for getting the ball rolling. That was awesome. And I'm going to hand it over to Natasha, and she's going to kick the day off.
So just a couple reminders while I'm talking. Kristen will be letting folks in, but we are recording this, just so you know. I do block out other people's images. So feel free to leave your image up if you'd like. It will not be a part of the posted recording. But because we are recording this, if folks can stay muted unless you're talking, that would to us, that would be great. That just helps. And then we are going to be doing some interaction in chat. We are a small enough group that if you would prefer to say something as opposed to typing it into chat, you can just raise your hand and let me know, or you can put in chat. We do, and we ran into this the last 2 weeks ago at the second session, though, that with so many Natasha Duarte's, you may need to show your camera even briefly, or somehow let me know that it's you, because it's hard when I can just call on a Natasha Duarte. The other way to do it is in the Zoom in the Zoom toolbar. Depends a little bit on what kind of device you're connecting with, but most of you may have a reactions option, and there's a hand raise option. And if you put that, it doesn't really matter what your name is. And I can say, the person with their hand up and invite you to unmute. So just a couple housekeepings on that. But we will try to make this interactive, and do feel free to wave us down if, with a number of people. I don't have all of you on a single panel. So if I'm missing that you have your hand up, put something into chat. And no worries, that person who wasn't on mute. If I do hear some miscellaneous background noise, I do have the ability to mute you. So please don't be offended if I do that. That's it's just housekeeping, no problem at all. And you are still very welcome to unmute when it's time for discussion. So with that, I would just, and the slide says part 2, but this is really part 3 of this book club. We've really been enjoying it. And I do like to just start off by tying it back, sort of like we did between the first and the second one. Last time we asked folks what they might try in the 2 weeks in between these sessions. And we got a lot of label reading ideas, or keeping track of protein throughout the day. Some also keeping track of water, like making sure they're staying hydrated and maybe feeling like they need more water. And so if you want to just put in chat, if you feel comfortable with it, then go ahead and put in chat what you tried. Or if you want to raise your hand and just let us know what you tried and share a little bit of the story, feel free to do that as well.
And if anybody has a really good story that they want to share as storytelling, please just unmute your mic while people are putting things in the chat. Because, sometimes people are like, oh, well, it was just a small thing. And really, it's really helpful for us to know, that somebody tried a lizard brain treat and it helped with anxiety, or I didn't try anything, but I started thinking about trying things, because that's just actually how things get going, right? I started thinking about, I know this sounds silly, but started thinking that I've never changed my toothbrush routine, because I was talking about dopamine, and that was an idea 6 months ago. And then I stumbled upon a new way to brush my teeth, which is really helping, right? So sometimes it's that letting things germinate for a while. So
one person said coconut water by their bed.
Nice.
And I see that Not Natasha has their hand up. Go ahead, and I love that, by the way. So thank you for that. But you can go ahead, Not Natasha, and unmute and share your story.
Thanks. So truth be told, I read your book almost a year ago, and it took me a while to start actually implementing the strategies from the book. But I've been religiously tracking my protein intake throughout the day and making sure that I have lizard brain treats and protein on me. And in that time, so I've been trying to deal with my anxiety and depression for over a decade. and tried many different things with no success. And this is actually the first time where I found something, your protocol, that's allowed me to pull myself out of that state and get a job and have a life. And it's actually a quite stressful job. And the only thing that's allowing me to be successful in this and make it through the day and keep that job is the fact that I am adhering to all of these strategies like my life depended on it, because it feels like it really does. And so I didn't want to speak up, but I felt like I had to, just to share that. And I wanted to be able to thank you both for writing this book and helping me.
Well, that one, congratulations.
Mm-hmm.
And two, thank you so much for sharing that. Like it, we were just talking about how weird it is with the book that like there's not a lot of feedback, not like being in clinical practice, and that you can handle a stressful job. Like you're making me teary in a positive way, and I'm just so joyful for you.
Mm-hmm. And I think that also really gets at what one of the main motivators for Kristen and I in writing the book is to try to pass on that sense of empowerment to people who are struggling, that they can do small things that add up over time that can have a really positive impact on their lives. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing. We do have a couple other comments that came in chat. And one person says they've been working on recipe development for balanced snacks prior to going to bed. So date and peanut butter rolled in a protein granola.
Oh, nice.
That's a great one. I think I'm going to take that out of the chat and put that on our jam board. And then another person said, peanut butter, protein powder cookies are very tasty. I've also shared the lizard brain treats I need help now handout with many folks.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. And really all of these worksheets, as you all hopefully know at this point, you can download them or print off multiple copies. And the intention is really to share them, right? So we can use them not only for ourselves, but also to support people we connect with, which is a way of supporting those positive relationships that we talked about, especially in the first session of this book club. Another person says, I have a lot of stressors right now, and I'm making sure I'm eating well and including all that I have learned in these lessons. It's been so helpful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank
yeah.
you.
And that's another really important thing. And we'll talk about this. Kristen will get into it a little bit more, but I think that's a really important point. Some of these tools are going to be, might become something that you do day in and day out and really depend on. And other times, there might be something that just gives you that edge when something really, you can anticipate that you're going to be either entering into a really stressful situation or dealing with someone who kind of pushes your buttons or pushes you over that edge, and just having those tools to even pull in for those special occasions can really help you be at your best, support you being at your best. So thank you so much, everybody, for your feedback. And so before we sort of move on, Kristen, if you want to go to the next slide, I think it just says questions, but this is sort of the transition between, the material we've covered previously and moving into this next set of chapters, this third section of the book. And so if you have any questions, and Kristen, that's okay. You can go ahead on. And I will be putting links in the chat box sort of throughout the session, but all of those links that I share, plus the recordings and everything, can be found at kristenallett.com/WFAN. So hopefully nice and easy for you guys to remember and find. And so when we refer to, even like the I need help now handout, if you can't quite put your fingers on it, you can always go to this webpage and find a link to just download that as a PDF and print it off. So
And there's just a lot of free material if you
There
go to kristenallett.com. We just consolidated it for this group.
Yeah. Yeah. So one person says they've recommended our book to many of their clients and have received much great feedback on our behalf. So, and thank you. So yeah, thank you for sharing that and for sharing the resources. So sort of before we move to the next step, does anyone have questions or follow-up questions from material? And there'll be time, of course, for questions and dialogue throughout tonight. But if you have any, like, oh, I was trying to do this and just didn't quite get it or didn't quite remember how it was supposed to work, feel free to put that in the chat or again, to unmute or to raise your hand. So someone asked, is there anything else besides protein bars for the 10-day upon waking thing? So like if you're dealing maybe with early morning waking, this is my interpretation, but feel free to add clarity. Like what else could you do aside from protein bars?
Oh, it can be anything. It's just protein bar. So like nuts and seeds, some people, nuts and seeds is fine, or peanut butter with some dried fruit, or apples and carrots. I do for early morning waking, I just do a spoon of peanut butter and a little spoon of jelly, and I go to bed, back to bed. Some people carry those, you have packs of peanut butter, like self-serve 1 pack of peanut butter, and they suck it in. I have another patient who does roll-ups. Just rolls up meat and puts a toothpick through it, and then she just goes to the refrigerator, puts it in.
I do yogurt. If you can tolerate dairy, Greek yogurt has more protein in it than just regular yogurt, but it basically tastes the same. And so if you like yogurts, that's another good alternative. And so just remember, if you're definitely, if you have a nut allergy, don't do nuts. Or if you have a dairy allergy, don't do dairy. But there are a lot of different things. And the idea is to just have that small amount. So it doesn't have to be like a meal portion of protein, but just some kind of protein and carbs. For not hungry in the morning.
Oh, not hungry in the morning. For not hungry in the morning, a little bit of juice and then breakfast. Like it's the juice or this protein bar. Like sometimes people want to do a half protein bar because they know that they're not going to eat for breakfast for a couple of hours. That is the thing. But again, the lizard brain treat, when you wake up, just getting some juice, and nuts or honey and a piece of protein for early in the morning. But it's the sort of refined sugar that is going to get you hungry in the 20 minutes upon waking.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're anxious or kind of emotionally numb or flat.
And just as a reminder, part of why that is because if we have adrenaline in our system, just how we evolved, that often signals not to be hungry because you don't want to have to stop and eat, feed yourself while you're running from a bear. So this sort of evolutionary thing. And so getting that quicker sugar in kind of brings you out of that physiological space.
Yep.
All right, well, let's keep going. And if you do think of other things, like I said, we're going to even though we're going to be covering some new material from section 3 of the workbook, you can ask questions about anything really when we pause for questions.
So just as a reminder, this is presentations for educational and informational purposes. It's not intended as medical advice or consultation or recommendation. So, we encourage you to try things, but you try things that make sense to you and make sense to where you are in your healthcare currently. So the last part of the book covers a lot. And I feel like we've covered a lot in the last 3 sessions. And so I'm going to do some highlights in the book, because the book was not really written to read from front to back. You can, it'll hold together that way, but we kind of assumed that people were going to go in and pick things out as they needed as well. And so if you want to do a screenshot, which is Command Shift 4 and for this slide, if you're not familiar with that, like these are sort of the highlights for this third section. And I'm going to go, Natasha and I are going to talk about some of the highlights, and we're going to talk about a few things, but then hopefully we're going to have a half hour where we can just do open Q&A. And if not, I can always fill up time with just like good things to think about. So the first thing on page 108 is a checklist for good sleep. And it's amazing how hard it is to set up good sleep, right? Because we have all these distractions and demands, and just sort of my top tips for this real quick is, one, set the time that you want to get up and the time you want to go to bed. And you should give yourself a full 8 hours. Like, if you're getting up at 6, that means you need to go to bed at 10, which means you need to start getting ready for bed at 9. And when I say starting getting ready for bed, that means generally turning off the screens. The screens really wake our brain up and stimulate our brain. And then we miss the signals to go to sleep. And then we're like, oh, it's 2 o'clock in the morning and I'm still not tired, but I am. And what setting those times of when to go to bed and when to get up, that helps set your circadian rhythm. And if you get too far out of it, you can wiggle an hour. But if you wiggle more than an hour, like, you're not serving yourself very well. The room should be dark, generally speaking. It should be quiet, generally speaking. There are people who are like, no, I can't sleep in the dark, or no, I can't sleep with silence. But like those are good things to think about. The other thing that's in that book is the sleep clock. And this is so for those of you who are not on West Coast time, you probably have run into this at least once today, where you're just like, and you might happen during our talk, where you're like doing fine, and then you're like, oh God, it's so hard to keep my eyes open, I'm so tired, and then like you just kind of perk out of it. That's a melatonin hit, and it starts, there's like these little pulses of melatonin that will make us tired. And mine's really moving right now because in Seattle, the time is light and dark when the sun gets up is shifting really fast. But what I know is that either I have my head on the pillow, like, so at 8 o'clock, I will get a tired moment. And my cycle is an hour and a half. It can be 45 minutes to an hour and a half. So my cycle is an hour and a half. So it's at 8. So at 9:30, my head needs to be on the pillow with the lights out, or I'm up until 11. Like, that's just how it is. Now, sometimes, like right now, I go to bed anyway at 10, but I know that I need to just lay there and be comfortable with just laying there and being awake. And then it's a meditation practice of like, nope, we're not thinking about that. We're just sleeping. So I also like people to sort of think about the difference between unconscious, asleep, and deep rest. So for those of you who have a history of using and sometimes using substances to go to sleep, that wasn't actually asleep. That's called unconscious. If you drank to go to sleep, that you weren't really asleep. Your brain was unconscious. And that's not really sleep. That's not all the restorative things that happen when you're asleep. Sometimes when we can't sleep, particularly if we're over the age of 50, like, it's not uncommon for us to have pretty shallow sleep. And so we will wake up and then go back to sleep and wake up and go back to sleep and go away. But every time we go back to sleep, we become unconscious. And so your brain puts that all together and you're like, I was awake all night. Maybe you can get a sleep app to see if that was really true. But people undervalue just resting. We live such hyperstimulated lives that I'm like, just, even if you're not asleep, just lay there and rest. So those are my top tips for good sleep. Did I miss anything, Natasha?
That sounds pretty complete to me. And, everyone is a little bit different, and you can also develop, I've been working on developing like a routine for going to sleep. And now I've been doing it for long enough that just starting the routine, I start to feel sleepier.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of like Pavlov's dog, right? Like I'm like training myself. Like when I start doing this sequence of events, I can just feel my, but it's taken me quite a while to sort of work into that. So this isn't something unlike the 3 days of protein where you might be able to feel a difference in your body on a shorter time. I would say, especially the routine part, that's been like a month and a half coming, but it is coming. And I can start, I'm like now really much more aware of it. And so that's one thing. I did put in the chat a link directly to, we have a page on the KristenAllett.com website that's sort of a collection of all of our different things around sleep, including an extra video that when Kristen gave a talk about sleep. And so if sleep is an issue for you, I'd recommend you also check out some of that. And we also have a little handout that was also talked about in the workbook about like that sleep clock to sort of try to tune in a little bit more to your own rhythms.
Yeah. So I'm going to take a quick survey here that you don't have to participate in. You were just going to put it into the chat box, but I would love to know how many of you was gym class when you were in school, and we're just going to do a broad survey. Overall, was gym class a positive event or a not so positive event, right? Like I know my gym class was not a so positive event. So if you'll just throw that in the chat while we're talking, and then Natasha will kind of add it up. Mm-hmm. But I like to distinguish movement from exercise because I think that I work with a lot of people who have become exercise phobic. And when I get into the history, like it often started in gym class where I was always one of the last people to be picked. And I was repeatedly told that I run like a duck. And, like it just wasn't a positive event, even though I did other things with my body. Like I wasn't very coordinated. And so it wasn't until I had a black belt in a martial art that I was talking to them like, I'm not athletic. And they're like, how'd you get a black belt then? And I'm like, oh, I might need to update that identity, right? So we can be exercise phobic for lots of different reasons because we flogged ourselves around weight loss. We can, right? And so we sometimes use the term movement rather than exercise because movement is so important in coordinating our brain and stabilizing our emotions and getting brain derived neurotropic factor to our brain because that's a fertilizer to our brain. So you don't have to do this, but I just want to do a quick exercise on the difference between we start in the book, we talk about power-ups and then walking and then doing other bigger events. And so we're going to talk what a power-up is. So first I want you to check in with yourself on a scale 1 to 10. How's your energy doing? 10 being lots of energy, can do whatever you need to do for the day. 1, like I'm laying on the floor. Why are you bothering me by talking? That's your scale. And then I want you to stand up from where you are if you're not already standing. And if you have good hips and knees, we're going to do 6 chair squats, right? So we're just going to go down into our chair.
And I'm going to show a sitting alternative for those of you who may not want to get up.
And so the sitting alternative, explain the sitting alternative.
So the sitting alternative is if you're in a place where it's not really convenient to get up, or if your knees or your body just isn't up to it, I'm just going to stay seated and just bring my arms up till my hands touch. If you can do that, or just up somewhere over your head and back down.
Yep. Okay. And we're going to do 6 together. Ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Check back in. A portion of you is going to have a positive impact on your energy scale. And you can put that in the chat box if you want. Some of you are going to be like, it's kind of the same. Hopefully none of you are like, oh, that made me more tired, right? So, but you just made brain-derived neurotropic factor that's going to help your brain learn what you're learning here better. And so like, exercise is like having this thing and we're going to get it done. And, you know, and if you love doing that, I'm not knocking that. If you're like, I like running 25 miles, awesome. But not everybody can do that or wants to do that. Right. My father climbed a ladder at 80 and fell off, not recommended. And he was diabetic. And I was like, you need to do arm exercises while your feet are healing. And he totally kept the diabetes in check. Right. And so it's do what you can. And so I just want to check and see what the survey turned out to be.
Yeah. So first, there's mixed responses in terms of positive, negative for gym class. And one person, I just want to share this because I love it. They said that grade 9 wasn't so great, but at the beginning of 10, their school actually offered lifestyle sports as a replacement for the traditional male-female exercise classes. And they were able to ride their bikes or do, you know, during PE to the beach or do other things. And so that put a much more positive spin on it. And in terms of the feeling better, people are saying positive energy, especially as for those of us on the East Coast, likely, or maybe Central Coast, ate dinner just before the webinar. And another person said that they hate exercise, but that what we just did was fun and easy. So, but if you ask them to do 50, no way.
Right. And we didn't ask that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and so starting with 6, right. And doing 6 every, like I've worked with several people when we used to go, you know, work in buildings, and every time she went to the bathroom, she would do 10 chair squats in the bathroom. And like, it gave her so much more energy in the day. And that was like 3 or 4 times, like, you know, it just divided over the time, and her legs got stronger and it got easier to stand up out of chairs and walk stairs. Like what a power up is just like a small dose that you can do in 30 seconds or a minute, but you're doing it throughout the day rather than not doing anything with your body.
And we've also heard that a lot of people who do have like their in-home or gym exercise program that they've been doing, and I used to do this myself. It's like I would get up in the morning and I would work out, and then I would sit for 10 to 12 hours. And so adding power, like regardless of whether you're not moving or you have a program or whatever it is, these little power-ups are just this nice way to get an energy boost sprinkled throughout the day, because you're not really going to work up a sweat. You can pretty much do it anywhere. You don't need special equipment. And it really breaks up for myself anyway, and for I think many people, the office or desk job where you're sitting a lot. Some folks I know have, you know, have more physically active jobs, but.
And what studies are showing in terms of glucose control, looking at specifically diabetes and high glucose that drives drives cardiovascular disease, but by the way, also drives anxiety and depression, is doing a little bit like walking 10 minutes after a meal makes a big difference. And I mean, that's what the studies show, but like what I think is just getting some movement after eating, and it like even a 2-minute dose of it, not a 10-minute dose of it, actually counts. And so when I was in recovery for a motor vehicle accident, I would do chair squats, I would walk in place, I would do wall push-ups, I would do wall planks, I would do wall sits. Had doing all these like micro things that my body could tolerate, but just sprinkled throughout the day.
Yeah. And I think, and someone put this in the, actually as a reply to the gym class question, that it was their free time to move around. And so for me, one of the biggest distinctions that I think of when I think of movement versus exercise is like movement is dancing, right? Like putting music on while I'm making dinner and dancing around the kitchen. Movement can be, for me, in my life experience, movement has a lot more option and can be a lot more fun than like an exercise program, which is somehow I've learned is more serious. And so it allows me to add more movement throughout the day in different ways, as opposed to not, I guess.
I saw somebody put in that they do dry sauna for 20 minutes and then weights and then elliptical, and now their glucose is better. And like, that's amazing, right? Like it sounds achievable, and it fits into her day, and is putting years on her life, helping her brain, helping her body, helping her mood, helping her physical health. Yeah. If I could sell one thing to change people's lives, it would be movement. But it's almost harder to encourage than food. So the next thing that we talk about is being inconsistently consistent. I've worked with so many people who are like, I did it for 2 months, whatever it is. They go on vacation, they stop doing it, and now they're a failure because they're not doing it anymore, and so they're not going back. Right? And or they're not committed, or they're not, and in sobriety, like, generally I see people do much better when they just like are done. But what we see is that it takes people practice to get to that point where they're like, yep, I'm done, right? Yay for the people who are just like first time out, like done, right? But any life skill, sure, like most people, when they're building in a new life skill, like they do it for a while and then they stop doing it. And it's the going back to it that needs to be applauded than the not doing it. And as a clinician, I have sat with a lot of people who are much more aware that they did it and then they stopped. I was doing exercise. I was in really good shape. And then they stopped doing it. And it's interesting to hear why we won't reinitiate it, right? Is another place. But first I just start like, it's okay to be consistently showing up, right? Like, and then noticing what drives the pattern. And so I just really want you to give you permission, because people come in and they're like, I'm going to do this 5 days a week. And I'm like, awesome. But how are you, like, what happens if you do it 3 days a week? Is that failure? Or once a week? Is that failure? Like, let's not name that as failure. Let's just name it like, oh, that happened once a week. And so just as an example, My husband works out 3 days a week, and he had this was pre-COVID. He had a class that he liked to go to, but he had business demands that like sometimes fit into that. And so in his calendar, he marked 3 classes a day that he was willing to go to. And the first person was like, hey, can I go to 11 o'clock? Can we meet at 11 o'clock? And so he'd take that off. And then somebody was like, oh, can we meet at 3 o'clock? And so he took that off. And then somebody was like, can we meet at noon? And he's like, no, I have a prior commitment. And the prior commitment was to him. And that was how he started getting more consistent, by noticing what was driving the inconsistent. But I still say, like, there are just some things that come back around. Like it's more important to pick it up again than that you stopped. So that's that. And then Natasha is going to share with you one of my favorite tools.
The I Did It jar. And we wrote about this in the workbook. So if you've read that, I've done different versions of this at different times, but I actually just recently started again. So I can say between the last book club session and now, that was the thing that I've been playing with. And I was visiting my sister on a beach, and there were these beautiful, I don't know if you can see, these really smooth stones, and they were in all different colors. And it's a pale yellow. It didn't really show up so well. And so I've now started on my desk. I have a little vase, and I've been trying to get more consistent at doing 10 minutes of exercise in the morning, sort of between breakfast and when I start my day, because then I just start a little bit more focused and with more energy. And so every time I have a day where I do it, I put in a stone. And one of the nice unexpected things is I just have a pile of these stones. I collected 30 of them. My plan is to just pile them in. And then when I get 30, and that might take me 2 months or however long it takes, I empty them out and I start again. But one unexpected thing is they're so nice and smooth. I find that when I'm in a meeting, or if I'm trying to think through something that's a little challenging, they kind of have also become my worry stones. Like I pick them up and roll them around in my hand, and it gives me something else to do while I'm mulling on something. And so it's also a way of just marking, like, it doesn't matter how long it takes me. At some point, my vase will be full and I get to start it over. And that's, so there's a bunch of different things that you get from that. And so I've been really enjoying it. And it doesn't have to be rocks. It can be whatever it is you have around. It can be paper clips. It can be marbles. It could be whatever it is that suits you.
Yep. And then I have a story. The client actually taught me about the I Did It jar. And she, when we first started working, she had a lot of physical health things going on. And like walking to my office was a challenge. And so I referred her to PT, and she started working with a physical therapist. And every time she did something that she thought constituted exercise, she threw a stone in a jar. And about 3 years later, we were working on another health project, but she was doing a lot better. And she told me that summer she had gone hiking a lot with her husband. And I was like, that is awesome. And she shared that she counted the number of stones in the jar, and it was like 550 or something like that, in the 500 range. So clearly over 3 years, she had not moved, exercised every day, but she had consistently showed up for it, to the point where she could now go hiking with her husband, which she enjoyed a lot. And she's like, wow, it only took 500 days. And for some of you, you're like, 500 days. Oh my God. But she had been incapacitated for at least 5 years, which is a lot more than 500 days. And so finding some way to mark change is really helpful, because, I've had people go, because so much around movement is around weight loss. And they're like, I walked every day this week and I haven't lost any weight. And I'm like, but how do you feel? And they're like, I feel great. I just want to lose weight. And I was like, but you feel better, right? So we have to get really clear that first we have to feel better. And then maybe some other things will happen.
Mm-hmm. So we have a number of comments in the chat.
Okay.
I just want to run through them, and they build off of what we've been talking about and then get into some of the other things on this list as well. So it's a nice segue. So one person said power-ups are a recipe for success. They're so easy to do. So that is one thing that power-ups do, is really lowers the barrier to start, right? Like most people can find 30 seconds to do something, even if it's just once a day to begin with. Another person says that they started with just one easy 15-minute workout first thing in the morning, and now some days they do 5 workouts. Hugely helpful, no matter how simple the exercise is. So building that up. Another person says there's that old song, put your left arm in and shake it all about. So doing a little hokey pokey here, shaking your body parts has been shown to relieve anxiety as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it just feels good sometimes to just like get that, like just move that body. Another person says the only failure is not trying.
Yeah.
And then one person shared that they prefer walking or hiking outdoors rather than walking on a treadmill, but winters can be hard with the snow. So they picked up snowshoeing.
Excellent.
As a way to just keep going.
Yep.
My mom, who has become attached to walking, has gotten those sort of stretchy cleat kind of things that go over her shoes for winter, as well as another way to keep those walks in. Someone else said, I've said, find what allows you to close the gap of being inconsistently consistent. For them, in-home workouts closed that gap. I used to go 2 to 3 months between exercises, but now they don't go more than a week.
Nice.
So that's great. Another person says, I did this protocol to feel better and just happened to lose 40 pounds.
Whoa.
So that, it's like if you shift your focus on feeling better, other things naturally come with it over time.
Yeah.
And then this is the last comment for now, and then we can go back to some of the other stuff. But as I'm working with clients with cognitive decline, 30 seconds is very doable and generally will be tolerated. Also, a power-up session during sundowning may be very helpful.
Oh, nice. That's a good tip.
That is a good tip. Yep.
Do you want to share your tip on how you close the gap on movement?
Yeah. So I work at home, even pre-COVID. If I wasn't off doing, having meetings or doing other stuff, I have a home office, and I was really wanting to work more throughout the day. I was really at the time building on that, get up and try to move my body. And it seemed silly once I finally figured it out. But one of my obstacles was, because I had the luxury of working at home, I would often be sock-footed or in my slippers, which wasn't necessarily conducive to working out. And so just starting the day by putting my sneakers on was like magical. It was like such an easy thing. But then I was much more likely to, do a light jog up the 6 stairs to the kitchen from my office, or to get, to go and run around outside for 5 minutes if I had a break in between things. And so thinking, we all have our own little stumbling blocks, but if you can think about what it is, and especially if you've recently fed yourself and you can be curious about why you're stumbling on a particular thing, sometimes these little things will come to you, and it can make a big difference of closing that gap or figuring out how to work around what has been an obstacle for you.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
So we talked about 30-second power-ups. And if you're trying to expand your endurance and resilience, like exercise really helps on a physical as well as emotional level. And then building your base for walking. And like, I've had people start with like, just walk outside for walk outside for 3 minutes and then come back in and then walk around the block and walk around 2 blocks and just build up that tolerance. And then add diversity of movement, of activity. And so sometimes when people haven't been exercising and they like join the gym and they want to go to a Zumba class, quite honestly, that's too much, right? And so I have to like scale them back, and I'm like, why don't you just go to the gym for 10 minutes and do something? And they overexert themselves, and then they're tired or sore, and then their body doesn't want to do it again. And so that's one of my metrics is you might be a little tired after working out, but you shouldn't be exhausted, and you should not be sore the next day. Like we're not in the stage of life at any time where no pain, no gain. Like maybe that's for Olympic athletes, but it is not for us. And I actually don't even think it's for the Olympic athletes. And then really working through the overcoming the barriers for movement. And we've talked some about that, but like there are financial barriers, there are time barriers, there are just knowing, like when I was so injured, like what could I do that wouldn't hurt me more? And coming up with that. For those of you, hopefully we all have health insurance at this point, like absolutely use your PT credits. Like so that's what they're there for. And getting a little bit of instruction on what to do can really go in. And I've had people are like, oh, I don't want to pay for the copay. And I'm like, go to the copay, pay once and say, I need a program to do for 6 months, and then come back in 6 months. Like they'll help you out, figure that out if you're really stuck. So, any other comments before I want to review labs? The last chapter of the book is about getting your physician to do better labs for depression, anxiety, and fatigue. But I want to see if there are any questions before we move to that.
There are right now.
Okay.
I did just put in chat again, a link to our page on sleep, and then a link to a page that we have about movement with those resources and thoughts. So if you do have questions, like I said, when we're going to move into labs, but like you can always come back and ask questions about any of this. So it's not a closed window.
Oh, what movement practice makes you feel good? And like you guys actually have done really great commenting about it. You can throw that in the chat box. But like there have already been many comments. So thanks for being so participatory.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I very early on became quite impassioned about is that if somebody comes in and to their primary care physician and says, I'm depressed, their doctor says, here's Prozac or something the equivalent. And that is as much workup as they got. Now, things have gotten a little better and they'll do 1 or 2 labs, but there's really good evidence out there that nutritional deficits, as with the story of the person who spoke earlier, can cause depression and anxiety, or at least contribute to it. And so I wanted to come up with a way of empowering you to have a better conversation with your primary care physician. So the first thing we have to realize is your primary care physician or nurse practitioner might have a little more time, but if you are actually seeing an MD, they have 9 minutes. That's it, right? So the more when you go see a physician, the more you can write down, like, here are my symptoms, here's what I'm doing about it, and here are the questions that I want you to answer, and this is what I want you to do. The more you can document that, so you can walk in and hand it to them and they can read it rather than you explaining it to them, the more time you're going to have in that appointment. The other thing that I want you to know is your chart is your chart. You, depending on what state you're in, like you have access to that chart, and there's different levels of access, but most people can add documentation to their chart. So if you bring in a document and you say, please put this in my chart, it is now permanently in your chart, and they're responsible for those questions that you asked and those symptoms that you listed. Where if you go in verbally, you're just trusting that they wrote them down for you, right? So the first thing is that I want you to go in with a really good symptom list, which is in the handout that I think Natasha is going to put a link in. You can, this is also in the book. And I just wanted to go through like what these are and why you might want to get your physician to do it. So a CBC, a complete blood count, this is just red and white blood cells. Mostly it's looking for anemia. Certainly it's screening out a whole host of things that I'm not going to go into of chronic diseases, but like minimally it's looking for overt anemia, which is overt iron deficiency, B vitamin deficiencies like folate and B12, B6, and protein. And most physicians will do a CBC with depression and anxiety. Then there's a comprehensive metabolic panel. This is liver enzymes and total protein levels. And you should, when you get labs, you should always ask for your own copy, and you should look at them and be like, wow, is there anything falling off the edge of the spectrum? And then ask them about that. Like, what does that mean? This is almost abnormal. What should, like, how do I get that back in the middle? Right? You can ask questions about your own labs. And so you should look at that and make sure that everything's kind of in the middle of the path. Then there's a thyroid stimulating hormone. This is checking for thyroid. If it's an inverse relationship. So as it goes up, you become more fatigued. And as it goes down, you become more agitated. And a lot of people are walking around with this elevated, which is causing fatigue, which looks a lot like depression. So fatigue and depression take me 5 appointments to kind of separate them out, but there's a lot of overlap. I like to look at a lipid panel because this is a block of fat. And I don't see this so much anymore, but there was a time when cardiologists would lower the cholesterol levels really low, and the brain didn't like that at all. They've stopped doing that, but I still want to know, because there are some people out there with naturally low cholesterols that feel really fatigued. And we make hormones out of cholesterol. And so I want to know what that is. And again, you can just look and see. Hemoglobin A1C is usually a diabetes marker. So it's this protein that hangs off of a red blood cell, and it's floating around the body. And every time it goes past the glucose and the glucose hits it sticks to that protein, and it gets thicker and thicker and thicker as we move towards diabetes because there's so much glucose there. So that's what it's measuring. So pre-diabetes, you want to stay below 5.7. This will be in the range. But every once in a while, I have somebody come in at 4.7, which means their average blood glucose is really low. It's below 100. That's an average. And they're not doing keto. If you're doing keto, it's going to be low. And those people are very anxious, or they look a little bipolar, and really they have reactive hypoglycemia, and they're having mental health problems because they don't have enough blood glucose around on a stable enough platform. And so that's really a little complicated, and your physicians aren't looking for it, but you can look for it. Okay, here's the one that I absolutely want you to get done, particularly if you're a woman, but even if you're a man, is ferritin. Ferritin is the storage unit for iron. And iron helps you make dopamine and serotonin and oxygenate your entire body through red blood cells. It's a really important mineral. But if it's too low, it's bad. And if it's too high, it's bad. And so you kind of have to measure it. And there's a lot of people out there who have enough iron to make red blood cells up here in the CBC, but their ferritin levels are below 50. And if you're a woman, studies show that if ferritin's below 50, you're really fatigued. You're not depressed. But you'll be put on a psychotropic or put into psychotherapy for 2 years before somebody looks, as in a study in Switzerland. And so, which is on a blog somewhere if you look for it. Like, I'm really passionate about this. And so getting your ferritin done, and it's like a $67 test. It's not that expensive. It's so worth advocating for it to get done. So getting inflammation is as a cause for depression, anxiety, and mental health. And of course, if you're depressed or anxious, it's more likely to use. And so getting a SED rate, or what's called C-reactive protein, CRP, is an inflammation marker. Particularly if you're in recovery, and generally I tell people don't get blood work until you're at least 3 months in recovery, particularly if you've been using alcohol, because alcohol tears on a lot of systems, and your body needs 3 months to sort it out. But unless there's something serious going on, then of course you're going to get the blood work done. But sometimes people are like, I just want to know if I did liver damage. And so they get it done the first month, and sure enough, their liver enzymes are high. And then they're really upset because they think they did liver damage. And you know what they do when they're really upset? They drink, right? And so like the main thing that you want to do if you have liver damage is not drink, right? So you want to make sure you have some sobriety legs before you get that information. So if CRP is out of the normal range, you are going to feel like crap. And it's going to look like a fatigue and an achiness and some headaches. And then the thing about CRP is that it's pretty easy to treat in terms of get enough protein, get regular sleep, move your body, drink lots of water. Getting your B vitamins done, B12, B6, folate, homocysteine is another way of getting your B vitamins measured. And again, you want it in the normal zone. In Washington State, insurance companies will not pay for vitamin D. And yet we live in a state where there's virtually no sunlight. Like, it is worth getting a vitamin D done and making sure that you're between 70 and 90 is the range that I like people in. I've had people come in with like 4, and when it's that low, they're achy and they don't sleep because they can't absorb calcium and magnesium, and their rates for different cancers are going up, and it helps with COVID, and it helps with allergies. Like, it's really worth, every few years paying for your vitamin D to be done. And there are labs that you can, in many states, I don't know all the states, but in Washington and several other states, you can order your own labs. If you look around on the internet, request a test is one.com is one that I send people to. And then if you have a integrative medical practitioner or a really savvy doctor in some way, getting a salivary cortisol or a continuous glucose monitor can be really helpful. And so I just put those in there, and that's certainly a reach for most primary care physicians, but it's worth asking. Never hurts to ask if you have somebody who's pretty cool. So that's my quick summary. I think there were a lot of questions because my chat number went up.
That was me putting in some links primarily.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's helpful. Any questions about labs?
What do you think of a cholesterol level of 240?
Yeah. So that I would have to look at a whole context on that. Like, cholesterol you have to really look at what everything's doing. I've had super athletes that are at that level, and they need to be at that level because our muscles burn fat. I've had people have high levels, but they're good cholesterol. Their HDL is really high. I've had people who that made sense because they were losing fat mass. And when you lose fat mass, your cholesterol levels go up. So you really have to look at context. And you also have to look at family history of cardiovascular risk.
What do you do with the results? How can someone know how to improve numbers, not conventional medicine? Where?
Yeah. So one of the things that you can do, we all have the internet and you can Google about any piece of information, right? But you can also, and I think that this is actually Natasha's story. I'm going to steal your story, but
Sure.
We've known each other since we were in our 20s. And I remember having a conversation with you where you looked at probably something in your CBC, and you noticed that your red blood cells went from the high end of the spectrum while you were in Africa to the low end of the spectrum. And you wanted to know if that's why you felt like crap. And was that your story?
It wasn't.
It
But
wasn't your
sounds
story. Well, it was
feasible.
somebody else who was in
Yeah,
Africa.
yeah.
And that by looking at your lab work, and if you're really data driven, like I have people come in with these spreadsheets and they're like, here are the dates and here are
I'm
the
that
tests.
person.
And here's the changes. And it's worth asking questions if you're near the edge of the spectrum. Right. And you can,
Yeah.
I was just talking to somebody and they're like, it's not so important to know all the answers. It's to being able to, and this was actually, I was talking to him about sobriety and I was like, how have you held sobriety for so long? And he's like, I stopped trying to be the answer and I started asking the questions. And I love that statement because it's curiosity that brings us answers. And I'm just trying to give you ideas on what you can dialogue with. I wish I could be your physician for all of you. And I wish we're going to build out resources over time, but this is our start. And asking your doctors to do more and be curious with you is helpful, particularly if you write it down, they're more likely to do it.
Yeah, I do want to just add just a little note of caution that comes to my mind. When you can find anything online now, but I would definitely recommend that you go to a trusted source or a vetted source like the Mayo Clinic or WebMD or other ones, and not rely on somewhere like Facebook for your interpretation. And I know that's not what you were saying, Kristen. I just wanted to point out that there's all kinds of information on the internet.
And so if you don't know about PubMed
is
awesome.
Good too.
Like it's all the abstracts that medical, it's free search engine of medical abstracts.
Yeah. And the one thing that I will share of my own history, when I was in the Peace Corps in West Africa, and when I came back, I thought I was having a really hard time re-entering my life here. And I thought I was really depressed and I didn't know what that was like. And I didn't really I wasn't feeling like myself and I didn't know how to really describe it. And I did have blood work done and my, all of my adrenaline markers were in the low side of normal. And so that was sort of discounted. And it took me quite a while to go and went around in many circles before I finally found a medical practitioner to work with me. We pushed the adrenaline thing and that really helped. And it was the difference. And so I would also just, part of having more information for yourself on this is like, you are the best expert on your own body. And it may take some time, but developing some level of trust, of understanding because, if you don't have a baseline, it's hard to say where your normal is or when you're out of sync a little bit. And so We do have some other questions that came in about this, Kristen. One question was, what information on this slide can go up, and I'll just add in parentheses, or down, because it depends, if you're under a lot of stress? So like, which of these markers might get worse and if you're just stressed out?
All of them.
Yeah.
Right. Like all of them. And it can go different ways. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when people get stressed, sometimes they don't eat as well. And so they become more anemic. And so I guess that would go down. Comprehensive metabolic panel. Again, not eating enough protein, that can throw the liver enzymes off. And the liver enzymes can go up or down depending on what you're eating when drinking. Most people's thyroid will go up, but there are those who will go down. Cholesterol just changes in all sorts of directions. A1C can go up or down. Ferritin iron can be affected. Generally, you want CRP to be low. Like I like it, SED rate or CRP. I like it to be pretty, in the lower third of the spectrum. This will definitely go up with high stress. B vitamins are a function of how much you're eating or if you're taking in a multivitamin. And studies show that during high stress, you burn through more B vitamins. Usually high stress, we're not outside, and so we don't get any vitamin D. Cortisol can go up or down depending on age, history of PTSD, how many children you've had, all sorts of things. So that can go up or down. And if you did a continuous glucose monitor, some people's glucose goes up with stress and some people go down. And some people, it's the type of stress.
Mm-hmm. So we did have a question about the salivary cortisol and what that indicates. They just added that their understanding is that can change rapidly.
It can change rapidly. So salivary cortisol tests, again, this takes a practitioner who can interpret it. But sometimes I've had people say that was the thing that helped me find the right practitioner, as I called around and asked if they did salivary cortisol tests. And knowing how to interpret that and what to do with that information helped them find the clinician that they wanted to work with.
Great. I think that's the questions for now.
So we have about 10 minutes. I always, so you can put questions and I'll just take general questions about anything that's in the book, or just because you have a naturopath in front of you and you're like, I always wanted to ask that question. Like I do that all the time. But I would also appreciate you putting in what was helpful. What is your 15% solution that you're going to try? What was your biggest take home of this series or today? Because it's really, like, I really believe in this material, and it is really helpful to me because, like, I think this is true for Natasha, but like our core drive in life is to be useful. And so it's really helpful for us to know how we were useful or how we made you curious to go try things, because that's kind of the currency that helps us show up. So with that, any questions or curiosities with the time that we have left? Or you can we'll just share what you're going to take home.
So one person says, it seems like there's a unique population that this work applies so well to. Is there a way to define that population gleaned from your work?
Yeah, that's a good observation. So I generally So when people come through the door, everybody cops to depression, anxiety, or fatigue. And so I generally start with 3 days of protein to stabilize blood glucose, because then it helps me see what else is going on. I've done a lot of national speaking, mostly to mental health professionals and judges and lawyers, which I know is kind of a weird mix, but there it is. So kind of a wide swath, a nurse practitioner, so kind of a wide swath of people. And, certainly there are people out there who don't have depression, anxiety, or fatigue and are doing well. And I'm like, whatever you're doing with your diet, if you're not depressed, anxious, or fatigued, don't try this. But because it's working for you. But when people have depression, anxiety, or fatigue, I think it's worth giving it a try and seeing what the impact is. So that's kind of my differential, because, there are people with all sorts of conditions out there and like intermittent fasting comes up as a thing. And intermittent fasting is awesome for certain conditions, particularly the longer intermittent fasting where people are fasting for 16 plus hours. But that it doesn't help with people who have depression, anxiety, PTSD. And so that's kind of my differential is I prioritize mental health over about anything else. And I've gotten some pushback over that, but I contend that if you're too fatigued or anxious or depressed to work or exercise or engage in relationships, your health factors are going to get a lot worse regardless.
So we do have some people who are sharing what their takeaways are. So the most recent slide with the lab tests.
Nice.
And then another person says, working on the 20-minute pause to see if I really need to eat more, and will incorporate more movement, snacks, and power-ups.
Nice.
Another person says, might it be a blood sugar metabolizing issue involving whatever organs that might be involved with that entire system? So that's actually a question. I'm mixing the comments. I don't know if you want to.
Might it be, if the person wants to unmute and say the question a little differently, I'm like trying to process, like there's a couple of different ways I could understand that statement or question.
Mm-hmm. Or you can also, sorry, go ahead.
I'm happy to do that. So it seems like so much is involved with stabilizing blood sugar, that so much good comes from stabilizing blood sugar.
Yes.
And like you've acknowledged, not everyone needs to do it. Some people enjoy, sort of a stable level of, I don't know, for lack of a better term, mental health without sort of modulating their nutrition.
Yes.
So could it be that there are, that I don't know what organs are involved, but that it's a unique ability to manage your blood sugar level or not manage your blood sugar level, that this helps to correct? Is it?
Yes. Yes. So people who just manage their blood glucose, generally you can look at a couple of things that they've been doing probably most of their life, which is sleeping regularly, moving their body regularly, and eating whole foods, probably not doing too many antibiotics, and just general awesome genetics, right? Like that's generally what I see, right? The people who it really counts to stabilize their blood glucose, sometimes it's just a setup. Like I just was reviewing the literature because I did a talk on the endocrinology of stabilizing blood glucose for mental health for nurse practitioners. And there's these really interesting studies that if you get really hypoglycemic, it's harder for your body to to recognize hypoglycemia and correct for it subsequently. And so if you get really hypoglycemic, you're going to get hypoglycemic again, and you're going to get hypoglycemic again. And so what makes us hypoglycemic? Well, going all day and not eating and being traumatized is going to do that. Drinking a liter of soda is going to do that. Like, there's all these things that can get us into this really low range. And then if we don't correct for it because we don't have the stable routines, then we're just bouncing in it all the time. And then that becomes homeostasis for us. And I think that's, I think that's partly why when I work with people in recovery, why this is so powerful, taking this back to this community, is like one of the most powerful reasons not to eat is because you're looking for your next hit, right? Like, that's a bigger dopamine hit. So is that kind of getting to what your question is?
Yeah, but I still have this question. Are you saying that this can be used, or the state of being anxious or depressed that can be aided
Yes.
by proper eating and keeping one's blood sugar level? Can it happen to anybody? Or is there a population of people that have a more difficult time just naturally, because of, like you said, their genetics, modulating blood sugar, keeping it stable? I mean, there are people that I know that can eat garbage all day long and they seem to be, blithely going through life, and they don't struggle with anxiety and depression, and they have abysmal diets, as if their body is really like ironclad in keeping their blood sugar stable despite the insults.
Yes.
Other people, it's much more of a fragile system.
Yes. And I think I haven't, because of what I do, I've met those people as well who are just like, wow, like, how are you? But their body, there's always the exception, but their bodies tend to start to build, who are, just eating whatever and not exercising and smoking and whatever. Like, generally they start to move towards diabetes as they age, which then creates other problems. I don't know, like, there are exceptions, but and in some ways, like, it almost doesn't matter, because like, it's always up to the individual to decide if this applies to them. It would be interesting to study, those opposite people, but to your question, like, can you make somebody do this? Like, yeah, I've certainly had people who were like doing great in their lives, and then they got into COVID and they stopped moving and they stopped socializing and they started drinking more, and like, they have never had a mental health problem, and now they're having a major mental health problem because their body lost its resiliency. And they can recover it again. I've seen people with horrible resiliency in their body, like, kind of lock it down and kind of chop wood, carry water for, it's not a week, and sometimes it's a year, and sometimes it's a few years. But now they're like, oh yeah, on Sunday I had 2 meals and I was fine. And mostly I ate 3 meals a day. And I can miss a couple of nights sleep and I'm fine. But like, then I start to get depressed or anxious and I clean it up again.
Thanks. That's really helpful.
Great.
So we have just a few more minutes. I want to make sure I cover everybody. And I have another talk to do. So we're going to wrap up on time.
So I'm just going to first say that and then I'm going to read out a number of the comments that have come in, but I did just share in chat links if you want to be notified as Kristen and I develop more material. We send that. We have an email newsletter that we send out once every month or two. That's the inconsistently consistent part of our lives. And I put a link to subscribe to that if you'd like to. You're more than welcome to join our community as well. And then we share when we have new videos or new worksheets or challenges or different things. And then as well, I've been emailing you all about the thank you card for Mario and for WFAN for hosting this 3-part book club, as well as providing so many copies of the workbook for folks who otherwise wouldn't have easy access to it. And so I put a link for that e-card if you want to, which I think you can do anonymously as well. But if you want to write something or add your name or let him know that you like this kind of program, whether it's for us or just this type of thing, that's a place you can do that as well. And then with that, we've had a number of people say that what their most useful information was. So I thought that might be a nice way to sort of just close out this 3-part book club. So one person says the most helpful information for them was the correlation, details, and connections from food to the brain to the body. I've found that clients who gain this type of understanding, knowledge made simple, do better and are more able to make positive changes. The explanation of this material is invaluable in helping me give clients this insight. Very nice. Another person says, I appreciate your insight to put mental health over weight loss first. And with that improved weight loss will probably come with time. Let's see, I'm going to skip this one and we can come back to it because it's a little bit of a question. Another person says, the workbook is fabulous, succinct, and easy to read, and the activities are doable in small bites. Currently, they're working with clients with cognitive decline, with anxiety, depression, and mood shifts. Much of what you offer in your science-based plan could easily be applied across the lifespan. Absolutely. As a researcher, they'd be very interested in the expansion of our work, as delivering these habits earlier in life could potentially stave off T3DM, also known as dementia, Alzheimer's disease. So
yeah. Well, if you're a researcher and you want to talk, please reach out.
Yep. And then one person said in the last session we mentioned breath work, and we probably don't have time to do that tonight. But do you have a resource or link? And with that, I will just quickly say we really don't have time, but on the blog on kristenallett.com, and I can find it real quick, is a blog post that Kristen wrote on this topic. And so that would probably be a good place to start. The other place that you can find all of this information, most of the information that I've been sharing links to, and I'll put them on the WFAN page as well, is under kristenallett.com/conditions. And then the breath work is caught up in the other tools category because we have some stuff that isn't as well built out, but we still wanted to be sure that people could find it. And so I'll put that other tools link right there.
Anyway, thank you, everybody. This is just, and we just had so much fun doing this.
Definitely. This has been a great experience for us. I'm so thankful to all of you for participating and being so interactive. And I will be sending one more email around to everybody who registered when this final recording is posted. It'll probably be in about a week, just like the other ones.
And just to wrap up, I want to just point out the lesson that Mario and Jackie offered us, and it's one of my hardest that I don't do nearly enough, is to reach out and ask to connect and help. And, because what's the worst that's going to happen is they don't respond or they don't say yes. And what's the best that can happen is there's now connection and community. And so I really appreciate that Jackie and Mario really got the ball rolling and reminding us of how important it is to just be vulnerable and to ask. And I was very honored that that happened.
Yeah. All right, everybody.
Okay.
Well, have a wonderful rest of your day, what's left of it, depending on where you are, what time zone you're in. And yeah, keep in touch.
Okay. Bye.